Sorry for interrupting, Adam.
Great. Okay, thank you. Thanks, Andrea. Geraldine, you are about to introduce yourself.
Please continue your conversation. I'm done.
Geraldine, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself and what your experience is with the media?
Yes. I think that we're going to hear an echo because we are 3 people in this room. So sorry if you're hearing. Just a second.
Sorry, Adam, actually, Geraldine is a colleague of ours, and she's not a participant, so she belongs to the team. So you can pass the word to somebody else.
Okay, all right, Phoebe. Phoebe, tell us about your experience of dealing with the media.
Greetings, everyone. I'm Phoebe, founder of Money Africa, Cameroon. And I've had an experience with the media once.
Phoebe, it's very difficult to hear you. Can you speak up a little bit or use headphones?
Can you hear me now?
It's you're quite faint, Phoebe.
Okay. What about now?
That's better. Yeah.
Am I audible?
Yeah, that's better, Phoebe. Yeah. Where are you?
From Cameroon. I'm in Cameroon presently, in the southwest region, Buea. And had an experience, I think twice, with media. And the first thing I realized is that they only try to get in contact with people who can sponsor their events on their TV stations. It was a case that has to do with broadcasting. And for you to go on air, they charge you fee. Sometimes you are not really told the amount until you get to the station, the TV station, then they give you the amount or you have to pay. And then another thing is that the more you are interested in broadcasting or try to promote your activity on their local stations, the more the fee is, the more expensive it is. And also, TV stations like the national TV stations, like in Cameroon, CRTV, we have the national TV station called CRTV. And if to get there is very, 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 very challenging. It's kind of centralized. It means if you're in the southwest, you have to travel all the way to Yaoundé to get yourself and then book an appointment later on. It takes about months to get your stuff.
So it's very hard. It's very hard to get media exposure. It's very hard to get media exposure.
Yes, okay. Very difficult. Yes. So yeah, I don't know. It seems they have their own program that they already have, and it's been controlled from the presidency. What is being showed to the general population, and before you get that opportunity for your own program to show, it takes a really long time. And sometimes you contact specific presenters to appear on their shows, and that also requires that you pay high money because it's a national TV station, and they know that what you are going to say, that the entire country is going to watch it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's a very difficult media environment that you're working in, Phoebe. Thank you for sharing that with us. Very difficult. Dolores.
I'm also from the EEB.
All right. Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Dolores. Daru.
Yes. Hello, Adam, and hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Daru.
Okay. So I'm from NGO Ekoton. We are based in Surabaya, Indonesia. So I'm happy also to meet friends from the Arnika, yeah, he mentioned about Indonesian project. I also involved in the project to analyze the dioxins in the chicken eggs from the plastic waste burning, imported plastic from the Western countries. Yeah, so in my experience with journalists, yeah, I often have communication with journalists because our NGO is quite recognized as NGO working in the plastic pollution issue, industrial pollution in Indonesian rivers. So we often have organized a demonstration and we invite journalists and they usually come. But sometimes it's difficult to make journalists come to a press release that when we want to share a report about our result research of investigation, like when
Yes.
we yeah, like when we did the investigation on the waste trade, actually not only Ecoton, but we are as a network, we invite a lot of journalists, but not many able to come. So it's still difficult because the
What were
journalist
you offering
seems
them? What
very
was the
busy.
story that you were offering them, Daru?
Oh yeah, it's about the waste trade in Asian region.
Right.
We invite Indonesian journalists. Maybe it's not really interested for them because it's cover many countries, not only Indonesia.
Yeah, I think that's similar to what Martin's saying, is that it always helps if you've got the local or the national angle.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to talk about that more. Great.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Anthony?
Hello, hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, my internet is bad, so I will not be able to use my video.
That's okay, but we can hear you. That's the main thing. Where are you, Anthony?
I'm in Lagos, Nigeria.
Right. So what's your experience with journalists?
The journalists are not too. I said you need to cut them a while, but most of the time here, because we always in our project here, you need to have like in your budget line media advocacy. So by the time media comes to your event, they expect you to give them something before they are able to publish a story. That's the reality here. Transportation. If a TV station is coming, for example, to cover your event, you need to pay for the transportation, and say look for some little stipends for the.
Wait, you have to pay for the TV journalists to come to the event.
Yes. So even if they come with their vehicle, you need to like give them something like for fuel or something.
Right.
And yeah. So it's very difficult. It's very difficult for you to just to send an invitation to a media house and you expect somebody to come. Somebody might could come randomly, but at the end of the day, it's going to be expecting like a token from you. So that's the challenge.
So that's the same kind of challenge as Phoebe has with
yes.
Okay.
Unlike Phobe's situation where the media is highly closed by the government, the media is still flexible. But most of the media owners just give the staff of the media houses. That's what the journalist tells us.
Right.
ID card. Okay, you're a staff of you're a staff of this media house, but we are not paying you salary. Go to the street and earn money by yourself. That kind of situation. So the journalist is expecting you to make to part with something before you see your story published.
Yeah, that makes it very difficult. Thank you.
Yes, because they think you have received the donor funding for the activity you are doing. So therefore, they also should be entitled to a part of that funding. That's always their psychology. Don't mind it. Maybe some of the activities you are using your own internally generated funds to push them through.
Yeah. I see. I understand. Yeah. So that's a very transactional relationship, a very, very difficult media environment. Thank you. Thanks for sharing that, Anthony. Agnes? Okay, let's try it. Leslie, are you with us?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Where are you, Leslie?
Okay, so Leslie, currently I'm in Uruguay, attending another meeting, but I work for an NGO called Stradev Nigeria, based in Lagos, the same city Tony mentioned.
Yes.
In terms of our experience with media, I would say we've developed over the years experience of up to about 15 to 20 years, specifically with the environment journalists and correspondents of all both electronic and the print media.
Yeah.
Our experience is not too far from, is virtually the same as Anthony has mentioned. They are quite liberal. They do not have any tie to the government. At any punch of a button, they are ready to attend your event, because particularly based on, they know we always produce findings and research and case studies that are very useful for the key stakeholders in Nigeria. So they regularly want to listen to us, they regularly want to see our releases, but you can't, I mean, it has to be with a token, just like Anthony mentioned. So it's the same challenge. You must have to have a budget. You must have to have a budget.
What does that mean, a token?
Sorry?
What does it mean, a token?
A token is the same thing, like you have to provide a transport allowance, you have to provide some financial backup that, I mean, even if they come with their vehicle, the money has to be substantial because they are not paid. And so for them to drive all the way from their location to your office or to wherever the venue, and cover your event for a whole day or half a day or a few hours and go back and put it on their media, then you have to, if you don't give out that token, or what I would call media allowance, you stand the risk of the entire story they have recorded not being aired. And you know, one big risk about that is they also work in association. They are called the environment journalists. So if you don't, even if you have a good rapport with one or two of them, once you don't pay that little token, there's an agreement within the association. None of the media will air the story. None of them will publish the story. So it is a huge challenge, such that anytime you are preparing a budget, you just have to have, at least we call it media relation. If you don't have that budget, media relations, you don't necessarily have to put any other name or tag so that it doesn't look like they are collecting a salary, but they call it media relation. Once you have that building and you are able to disburse that, all the media people will call. In fact, sometimes you can even have more than what you demand, what the number you demand, so long as they are sure they are going to get that token. Because in Lagos, that's where you have virtually all the media, whether national, states, they all have their branches or their anchor or their media correspondences in Lagos. So you can just attract them, either Lagos, Abuja, wherever you are. They are ready to take your story. But we just released the report recently on HHP situation, current situation in Nigeria, and we had a media event which even Anthony was part of. And we, of course, the number of media we expected, we couldn't get that number because we had to limit our budget to just a few, about 5 to 6 media that covered the story. And that was still very relevant because the few media that covered the story were like national media houses, print media houses.
So
and
the big ones,
the coverage quite good and influenced quite currently the government decisions or policy situation on HHP in Nigeria. Currently, the agency responsible for HHPs, immediately after that media event, has started calling stakeholders meetings. 2 stakeholders meetings on HHP situation is going on right now. The last one was just...
Can you tell us what is HHP?
Highly hazardous pesticides, please.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah, sure.
Highly hazardous pesticides. So the last stakeholder...
That's very helpful, Leslie. Thank you. That's very enlightening. Yeah. So
sorry, I'm a little bit stressed. I have another event. I'll be joining intermittently into the meeting because I'm engaged in another meeting. So apologies for this.
No, it's fine. Very glad you could join us, and it's very enlightening to hear about your experiences. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Agnes?
Hello, good afternoon, everybody. Let me just try
Hello, Agnes.
I hope everyone is doing fine. I hope you can see me.
We can't see you, but we can hear you.
Oh, sorry. I think internet, and I think you're able to see me now.
Where are you?
Okay. I'm very well, thank you, sir. And how are you?
I'm good, thank you. Where are you?
All right, I'm Agnes Kaviti from Lusaka, Zambia, Central Africa.
Well, welcome, Agnes.
So
what's your experience of dealing with journalists and the media?
Yeah, so generally everything is the same in Africa. Like my colleagues have said, there's always a token that you have to pay to these guys when they come to cover your events. Yeah, so apart from the allowance, they also need some refreshments because you can't keep them the whole day hungry. So apart from the token, there are also refreshments, and then you have to pay for their fuel as well, and just make sure you take care of them. So if you're not able to do that, then they definitely do not cover the event.
It won't come. Yeah, so it's a continent-wide thing. Yeah, I mean, in Europe and in Britain, if you have a press conference, you're expected to provide at least drinks and snacks, or you might do a buffet lunch as well. But you're not expected to pay for the travel costs of the journalists. So that's helpful, Agnes, and Leslie and Phoebe and the colleagues from Africa. Thank you. Thanks for explaining that to us.
Thank you.
And who else is there? David? I think that's everyone, isn't it? Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, thank you all for that. That's very helpful to understand the environment that you're working in and the particular challenges that you have. Let's go to our slides. And I will share those.
Adam, we have a question, I think, from Elena, right? Elena, would you like to say something?
Sure, absolutely.
Yes, hi, thanks, Adam. So I'm Elena, I'm working on Mercury with AEB, so indeed we have a lot of experience in dealing with journalists, but I just wanted to bring a question which you could potentially help with. So it's the issue of bringing very technical issues to journalists, which although they may be affecting people, like everyday life, they will just not see the interest. Yes. And the exact example is mercury in fluorescent lamps. So it's been going crazy last year. There have been delays in legislation. So we've been bringing out reports, national angles, global angles, whatever angles you can imagine. And then journalists wouldn't pick this up, although it was like a big, like you could see that the lobby from industry was, like sort of taking over, and the commission was delaying and things like that. So this is just an issue which, if you have other clever ideas on how to go about that, that I would.
Do you have the story? Do you have someone who? I mean, it almost sounds a bit inhuman to ask, but do you have someone who has been affected by mercury poisoning that would talk about what effect it's had on their life? Can you humanize it?
Not per se, but because the quantities from the lamps per se, it's very little, but there are the studies that show that what the effects of mercury are. It's a global pollutant. We have a global convention, so the issue of effects is not you see, but it's difficult to
I mean, this is the challenge. The challenge is to get these kind of broader thematic panoramic themes to focus them down into a human interest story, which is what will always help grab the journalist's attention. Is there, where are you?
Well, I'm now based in Monaco, but I was 22 years in Brussels. So
right. So, but you're the zero.
No, I'm working with the EB and the Zero Mercury Working Group. So it's a European level and then global level. So we have we're following the convention and also the European level.
Example of mercury pollution that you know of?
Well, the Minamata Convention, the Minamata incident is the very well-known one where thousands of people died. There are many incidents. So, but this is like, you know, this is the general, I mean, everybody knows this. And this will be referred to in whatever press releases, you know, mercury is in the 10 worst chemicals from WHO. You know, I can give you loads
is it in the food chain?
Yeah, it is in the food chain. It's in the fish. It's in the fish that we eat, that it develops and it affects people. And this.
If it's in a fish, how easy would it be to find the trace of the mercury in the fish?
It is there. I mean, this is very easy. Everybody has that. I mean, there is plenty of evidence that the mercury is in the fish. But
well, I mean, you could do. Could you do some kind of event where you found some? I'm just thinking off the top of my head. What would make for, you know, media interest? You found some fish, you took some fish and you got them tested in front of you know, you found someone to test for the traces of mercury within the fish. I mean, one of the things that helps with these big stories is to bring it home to people that it matters, because obviously it's horrible that there's mercury or there's HHP pesticides or that there's microplastics, but we know this in a way, you know, the average citizen knows this and that it doesn't really affect them. But if you can say, actually, it matters because look what's in your tuna sandwich or look what's in your cod and chips, it matters, this is what you're eating. So, you know, off the top of my head, you know, maybe we can have a longer conversation later on, but we could absolutely do that. But off the top of my head, it's always it's finding that way to bring home, you know, turning the zoom out of the broad panorama of the horribleness of it into the zoom in that brings it home to someone. This is what you're biting into. This is what's going through your digestive system. This is what you're excreting, you know. And if there's a way to do that, to illustrate that with some kind of event, you know, something like I don't know, getting the actual fish, getting the scientists in front of the camera to say, this is how I find the mercury. Oh, look, this is where it is. You know, it's finding something new and dramatic and interesting. But it's a perpetual challenge. Of course, it's a challenge. And then in 6 months' time, you'll try again, and they might say, well, we've already done mercury in fish. You know, what else you got? So, I mean, we could talk about that in more detail, but that's the challenge for all of you, because you're all doing good and important work, is to how to get that specific, you know, get past that. Yeah, we kind of know that, you know, it's like saying, you know, pollution, you know, is bad and there's global warming. It's a perpetual challenge because how to refresh that all the time to keep the journalist interest going. And that means coming up with new and creative angles, you know, and maybe even some kind of performative event, you know, like you find the sludge with the pesticides in, or the water with the microplastics in, or the fish with the mercury in, and show it. So does that help?
It's a different thing. The mercury in fish is a different thing, but I don't want to take up the time from the.
Yeah, we can talk about it.
So
we can
it's
talk about
okay.
it.
Thanks.
It's always that challenge of illustrating that. But I mean, if it's in fish, people eat fish. So you have to find a way to show that if you eat this fish, you know, that we're all eating mercury, you know. So that's that challenge. But let's go to our slides. And share our screen.
Adam, I see that we have a new participant. Do you think, would you have a couple of, or do we have a couple of minutes for him to?
Of course we do, yes, yes. Who's the new participant? Who is that? Sorry, I was just about to share the slides, but I could put that on hold. That's not a problem.
It's Ahmed.
Ahmed, welcome, Ahmed. Where are you, Ahmed?
We cannot hear you, Adam.
You're on mute.
I'm not on mute.
I can hear Adam.
I'm not muted. I'm for sure I'm not muted. Oh, Ahmed is muted.
It's okay. It's okay.
Ahmed, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay, yeah, good afternoon. Absolutely. I'm also calling in from Nigeria.
Welcome, Ahmed. But what's your experience of working with journalists, and which organization are you with?
Okay, my name is Ahmed. With Community Action Against Plastic.
So you're breaking, Ahmed, it's a terrible line. You're breaking up very badly. Ahmed, could you put it in the chat? I think it might be easier if you could just put it in the chat because you're breaking up all the time.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Sorry, Ahmed. Okay, let's go to the slides. Can you see the slides? Are they visible?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So the big question, how does the media work? Well, in principle, it's quite simple. The journalist receives or finds information. The journalist then writes a story, article, TV or radio broadcast, and then they disseminate that. So the question is, what type of journalists are we talking about? So it's interesting, our colleagues from Africa are already saying correctly that they're talking to environment reporters. So environment reporters are the obvious point of call because we're dealing with environmental stories. But just to give you a quick breakdown of how the newsrooms work and how they're structured. So broadly, we have the general news reporters. So they will be the reporter that goes in every day and the editor will give them a story. And it might well be that your story is picked up by a general news reporter rather than an environmental reporter. So that's worth knowing. It means that you have to spend a bit more time explaining to them because they won't have the background or the scientific knowledge that an environment specialist will have. Or the specialist news reporters. So we see the specialist news reporters, i.e. the environmental, the economic, or sports reporters. Then, of course, there's the section editors. So there's the news editor is in charge of the news section, and there's the features editor. So features are generally seen as being a bit softer and more human interest. So features editors can be a good point of call for you, as well as the environment correspondents, because especially if you're talking about the human interest side or the effects of, say, the pollution or the pesticides that you're writing about, that if it's swilling into a lake where kids are swimming, I mean, hopefully not, but if that's happening or it's affecting the water supply, then instead of doing a hard news start like X thousand tons of pesticides are being released into the sea each year, blah, 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 you would do a featurey type. You describe, you could offer them a feature saying, this is where it's happening. I can introduce you to the people who live there. We can tell their stories. So you bring it through on the human side. So that's what I was talking about with Eleanor before about the mercury in the fish, and it's always finding that human way to do it. Then above the section editors is the editor-in-chief, and so the editor-in-chief is like the captain on a ship. He steers the vessel, or she steers the vessel. They decide the directions. They decide broadly what they're interested in. So you know, all of them, if you meet any of them at an event, you should talk to all of them and try and build a relationship with all of them. You know, if you could, you know, the ideal is if you can get the editor-in-chief to agree or to think that the issue that your organization is campaigning on or doing advocacy on is something that the newspaper should take up, you know, and would even ally with you. Occasionally that happens, and that's, you know, that's hitting the gold star, the mother lode. So we've identified our journalists. You've identified your journalists. You've worked out who it is. You know, it may be the environment correspondent. It may be a general news reporter, you know, that they don't have an environment correspondent. But even if they don't have a specialist correspondent, newsrooms usually have people with beats. So, for example, there might be someone that's writing about education. You know, they generally write about that, even if they're not the education correspondent, whereas someone else is writing about pollution. So obviously, you want to make contact with the journalist that's writing about pollution, not education. So you can, one thing you can do, of course, is you can email. You can email the journalist. Journalists get lots of emails, though. And what they're thinking when they're sitting at work and their emails are coming in is, where's the story? So I would say what's important when you're emailing a journalist is what you put in the subject line. So if you put something in the subject line like pesticides, they might be interested, they might be not. But if you've got a specific local angle, like pesticides are polluting the lake in whatever country you're in, or worsening pesticide pollution, or something like that, it's important what you put in the subject line. And when you write to them, acknowledge who they are, and ideally reference something they've written before. Say, dear Jane, I really like that article you wrote about how the fish are dying in the river because of the sewage outflow. I've got something which would also make a story for you. So the more you tell the journalist that you know who they are, you recognize their work and what they've done, the more receptive they will be. Journalists are people too, and many journalists become journalists because they're quite idealistic and want to expose wrongdoing. So you know, if you show that you know their work and you can reference that, that will help build a relationship, because that's what we're talking about here, is how to build a relationship with journalists. So you can email, then you can phone. You can do a follow-up phone call. It's better than just doing an email. I would say it's always worth picking up the phone. When you do the phone call, always ask, is this a good time to talk? It may not be a good time to talk. They may be on a deadline. They may be deep in another project. They may be a bit terse with you. And you think, oh my God, they don't want to talk to me. He was rude to me, or she was rude to me. They may not even mean to be rude. They just may be under extreme pressure, literally for the next 27 minutes. And then the story is filed and they can think about something else once they've had a bit of lunch. So always ask them, is now a good time to talk? And if they say no, can you call back at such and such a time? Then do that. So don't be off-put if they say, I'm sorry, I can't talk now, bye. And even if they hang up on you, it's probably nothing personal. It's just because of their workload. You can also approach journalists through social media, but I wouldn't recommend, you know, if you've got a story, I wouldn't recommend, say, tweeting it at a journalist, because it means the whole world will see and other journalists will see, and they'll get slightly puzzled as to why you're sharing this bit of information with the whole world. But you can direct message them on Instagram, or you can direct message them on Facebook or on Twitter if they're open to DMs. Generally, you know, depending, I know Twitter's different levels of popularity in different countries. Excuse me. Generally, journalists are open to DMs. One thing you can think about doing, because nobody does this anymore, is you send a handwritten note or a postcard saying, I really liked your piece on plastic pollution or sewage outflows or whatever related issue. You know, I've got something similar. Could we meet? You know, and they'll be so amazed that someone's actually bothered to write a handwritten note or a postcard, that you know, it's all about getting noticed in the deluge of communications and informations that they have with your contact details. Now, ideally, what you want to do is, of course, you want to be thinking about long-term relationships, building up a relationship with the journalist or journalists. So try, if you can, make time, invite them for a coffee, ask them, if they're working on a weekly, then Monday morning, it's going to be a quieter time than, say, Wednesday afternoon if the thing comes out on Friday. So, try and time that, invite them, meet them in person. It's all about building up those relationships. So you've got your journalist's attention, you've got their interest. So you've got to work out how to pitch the story. So pitching essentially means selling. We're all in the sales business, whether we like it or not. You are selling a story, and you're selling a story to a market. So your market is the media. So the more that your product fits the market, the easier it is going to be. So that's why, the first stage is to know your market. Don't ring up the education correspondent and tell them about your environment story, just as you wouldn't do that the other way around. So you have to start thinking, why would the journalist be interested in your pitch? Pitches need to be short, sharp, and effective. So you don't ring up and say, a new report's come out, and according to the European Commission, it's breaking this regulation. It shows how this regulation is being broken, even though the European Council said this and the European Commission said that, and it's in breach of this, and the UN's, I'm being slightly ridiculous here. Obviously, you're not going to tell the story exactly like that, but you've got to get them in 10 seconds, basically, or 15 seconds. You've got one chance, and maybe 30 seconds, but you don't have very long. It's about the elevator pitch. The elevator pitch is what happens when the Hollywood screenwriter finds himself in a lift with a very high-powered producer just by chance, and they've got between 2 floors, they've got 15 seconds to get the pitch, to pitch their story across. And it's a similar kind of thing. So you have to reduce the editorial process as much as possible, present the journalist with enough verifiable facts as possible. Now, all that said, journalists are always seeking stories. They want stories, but the easier it is you make it for them, the more packaged it is, the more receptive they will be. So even reporters, and then, you pitch it to the reporter could love it. The reporter has to sell it to the editor, the section editor. So the other things that I do is I work with journalists on various national media organizations and training them. And we always have a session about pitching, but pitching within the paper, not pitching to the journalists. They are already reporters. They have to go and pitch the story to their editors. So I asked an editor on a paper where I do some work, what do you want in a pitch from a reporter? And she says, you can see here, the main thing I ask reporters when they're pitching a story is to sum up the story in a single sentence or 2 at the most. It's very important that you can boil it down to 2 or 3 sentences. Now, when I started out, I'll tell you a little personal story. When I started out as a journalist, I started out as a magazine writer. So I was writing long, kind of descriptive articles for various magazines. And then I went to work for a newspaper, a middle market newspaper, which doesn't exist anymore, called Today. And it was very fast and very sharp. And when I got there and I was a feature writer, I would sit there at first in the editorial meetings. They say, what's your idea, Adam? And I'd come out with this long explanation of this was happening and that was happening. It was interesting because of this and interesting because of that. And the features editor eyes would glaze over and say, Adam, because the features editor had to sell it to the editor. Editor, very short attention span, 2 sentences. What's your best line? What's your news line? 2 sentences max. And this is exactly the same as what's in this slide 30 years later. It doesn't change. You have to boil it down to what is your news line. And then, so what this editor is saying is 1 or 2 sentences. The discipline of doing this helps reporters order their thoughts. Same for you. It provides them with a rough outline of the cell part that forms the kernel of the article. What does that mean? The cell par is the second par after the intro. So the intro might say, for example, you're doing a story about export of pesticides. Hundreds of thousands of tons of pesticides banned in the developing world are being exported, banned in Europe are being exported to the developing world. You know, that's the news. The cell par is it's wreaking terrible environmental and human and medical havoc and causing terrible consequences. So the cell par is after the intro. The intro is the first part, the cell par is the second part, saying why it matters. And this is what follows up here. They can then augment this by telling me why I should care. So this is how tough this business is. This is from an editor talking about her own reporters bringing her story. They tell me why I should care. So that's how tough it is to get journalists to do something, you know, and you've got to get that to the journalist, and then the journalist's got to get it to the section editor. And then maybe the section editor's got to get it to the editor-in-chief. So this is not easy. So the more thought you have and the more you hone it, the more you sharpen it, the better. So this is what one thing to do. Ask yourself again and again when you're selling this idea. And I know it sounds strange to be selling it because we're not in the sales business, but you have to sell it. That's what it is. You've got to get them to buy it or buy into it. So what? No, this is happening. Ask yourself, so what? And then think, what is the answer to that so what? So what, so what, so what? Because that's what the editors or the reporter will say, well, that's terrible, but so what? You know, why do I care? And that's the challenge. And I can't give you a magic formula for that. You have to think through really carefully what is the story that you're trying to get them to cover, and work out, you know, why would you, if you were that journalist, why would you want to read this? So one thing that can help, having said there's no magic formula, is the 5 W's and the H. If any of you have been reporters before, you know that the first thing you learn when you, as a junior reporter, as the editor tells you, always cover the 5 W's and the H. What is that? The who, what, when, where, why, how. So it's a very good exercise, and it will clarify your thoughts and sharpen them to do that before your pitch. Who is the story about? What is the story about? When is this happening? Where is it happening? Why does it matter? How will it have impact? So ask yourself those questions. And I would recommend that you write out those questions by hand and write out your answers by hand, because it's always more effective to do things by hand than to do them on a screen. It really makes you think and focus and sharpens your thoughts. So here's a news line, an example of a news line. This is what we might call the kind of the policy approach, which is something that, you know, you might say something like, or send, you know, this extract from the document that you've already seen. In July 2020, you know, you get through to the journalist, he says, what is it? And you start saying, well, you know, back in July 2020, Human Rights Council's expert endorsed a statement that the practice of wealthy states exporting their banned chemicals to poorer nations lacking the capacity to control the risks is deplorable and must end. Well, I mean, it's all very important and it has to be part of the story. It is part of the story, but that's not how you open. You open with, you get through to the journalist, he says, well, yeah, what is it? You say, well, do you know that EU companies are exporting chemicals that are banned in Europe to the developing world? And that's having a devastating impact on human health and the environment. And that's a yes. He or she, the journalist, should be interested when you say that. So it's a question of sharpening it up and thinking like a reporter. It's not easy to think like a reporter because you're not trained to be reporters, but that's, you know, that's the reality of it. You're in the news business, but you're on the other side of it. Now, one thing about pitching, which people tend to forget about, is timing. So try and find out, or at least understand, the daily working timetable of the media. if you're calling a national newspaper, you can call them and ask them, when is, just call the news desk and say, when is the morning conference? And the editorial secretary or news or assistant or whoever answers the phone will tell you. And they'll say, why do you want to know? You say, well, I want to pitch a story, but I want to pitch it at the right time of day. They'll be impressed. So let's say they usually have it at 11 o'clock. So you do not ring up at 5 to 11 to pitch a story, because they've already got their story list to take into the editorial conference. They will have that list probably at the latest by 10:30. So if there are conferences at 11, either you ring up at 9:30 when they're really looking for stuff to take to the editorial conference, or you can do it after the editorial conference. And so if it's not news crucial timing, if it's an ongoing thing, they've come out of the editorial conference at 12 o'clock, they're relaxed a bit, they've got everything is set up, they're thinking about maybe a bit of lunch in a little while. So you can say, I've got something, it's not an on the day story. You can say that it's not on the day, it's an ongoing story that I'd like to talk to you about. So it's very important when you make that call, because again, if you make that call at 5 to 11 and they say, it's time, I'm going into conference now, and they hang up on you, you'll think, oh my God, they hung up on me, they're not interested. It doesn't mean that. It just means you called at the wrong time. So pitch early before the conference or later, especially do not call up around 4:30 in the afternoon to pitch a story, because they're very focused on the next day's edition. And obviously I'm talking about newspapers now, but broadcast media will have their programs at set times. So, if you know that the main lunchtime news program's going out at 1 o'clock, you don't ring them up, ask to be put through to that desk at 1:45 with a story, unless it's a breaking hard news story, like something catastrophic has happened, which is real hard news. But if it's an ongoing kind of thematic story, again, you ring them up and you say, when's your conference? And you can say to them, when's a good time to call? And they'll be impressed that you bothered to find this stuff out. Now, one thing that you might want to be thinking about is exclusive or going wide. Every journalist wants an exclusive. So if there's particularly in a local national media that's very important or influential, you could think about offering your story to someone on an exclusive basis. What does that mean? If it's a report, obviously it's going to be in the public domain anyway, but you can give it to them in advance. So I'll give this to you a couple of days early before the others, if you can, if you could run a story on it. However, that might annoy the other media, make them less interested. So that's really a judgment call. I can't say whether you should do that or not do it, but it's something to think about. The other way you can do it is to have a press briefing or a press breakfast. Press breakfast is not a bad idea, because lunches, I think, at least in Britain nowadays, the idea of a press lunch is for news journalists is pretty much gone. But people might come to a press breakfast. You can invite a small group of selected journalists, and then you can give them some written material with some bullet points, a summary of the report. Now, you always give them, if you're releasing a report, you've always got to have a summary with like the 3 or 4 or maybe 6 takeaways from that. The holistic approach. So this is a question of how we judge success. So you might think that success means a journalist writes a big article about your organization, its report and its campaign. Not necessarily, and it's probably unlikely that they're going to write something in particular solely about your organization. What they're interested in is the issue. So, so Eleanor is talking about mercury in fish. It's more productive, I think, to think about how they can, to get them to write a story about mercury in fish, rather than and incorporate your organization into that story, rather than expecting them or hoping them to write a story about your organization's work. If you see the difference, the journalist almost certainly wants to write a wider thematical article about the issue, and it won't be about your organization as such, but it can include quotes and information from your organization as a source, which will position you and as someone with something to say on it, and in future articles they'll come back to you, and other journalists will see that you're talking about that. And that's all fine, because we're in the relationship building business. So we've got to think long term. And also we've got to think local, think about the effects of pesticides or plastics on your local area, not just on globally or even nationally. Is there something happening in your local area? And don't forget the local media, like the citywide TV station, the citywide newspaper, or the county-wide media. And then often that might get picked up by the national media. So think local as well, and think regionally. So I'd like to do your first exercise now. Hopefully some of you have done your homework and you pulled out your key messages from the report that we sent you. So I'd like you to think now, what is your key message? Who will you approach? Why would they be interested? And when should you approach them? Is there a news peg? Is there a report or a conference or an event or some kind of revelation? Now, what have you got, and how are you going to position it into the media marketplace? Okay, so I'll give you 10 minutes for that. It's now, it's 40, you know what, I'll give you 12 minutes, okay, until 20 past the hour.
Adam, sorry, are we supposed to write it down in the chat, or just think about it, or write it down in our notebook or whatever?
I think write it down in your notebook. Don't because the chat will be overwhelmed. Write it down in your notebook, and then we'll just zip around people, and they can talk it through.
Right. Thank you.
So please return at 20 past the hour. I'm sorry, I got the timing wrong. Not 20 past the hour, 15 past the hour. So it's just your initial thoughts that we want. Okay, welcome back, everybody. Martin is back. Who else is back? I see we have some new colleagues joined us as well. Noabufo and Chitra, welcome. Welcome to both of you. Okay, Martin, would you like to talk through your, give us your thoughts?
All right, sure. So as I already said in the chat, the key message would be massive import of waste into Thailand leads to poisoning of environment. We will approach together with our Thai partners, we will approach to national media in Thailand and also to local regional media in the affected regions in Thailand. And perhaps we will try a few international media with environmental reporters. And we are planning, or our Thai partners are planning to hold a press conference on December 15th. So that's when we're gonna release it, and we will approach to them a few days later to invite them for a press conference, for the press conference. And I think that's also the answer for the last question, or actually that's my question. What does it mean if there is a news peg, if there is a related event, or what does it actually mean?
A news peg means something like a peg that you can hang the story on.
Okay, all right. So there is, because we're gonna publish the related report, the report that actually brings some hard data, some scientific evidence for the key message. So that's gonna be the peg.
Right. So that's the event. That's the news peg. Yeah, is that the report's going to come out. Do you send the report out in advance?
Well, I think we didn't give it a thought yet, but it would be probably a good way, because we did a similar press conference in autumn, and the journalists actually asked me if they can see the report in advance so they can prepare for the article.
Yes, exactly. So what you do is then you put what's called an embargo on it. So you say that I give you this report in, a week in advance or 3 days in advance, but it's embargoed until, midday on Wednesday, the 6th of December, when you have your press conference. So because you don't want someone coming out with the story 1 day, 2 days before your press conference, because then nobody will be interested at the press conference because it's already come out. But on the other hand, you have to trust the journalists, because they need a little time to absorb the report and think it through and ask their own questions about the story, the story that you're revealing. So, yeah.
And in your experience, do journalists respect this when you ask them if it's an embargoed information?
Yes, yeah, they do. They usually do, because they know. I mean, if they don't, then you never deal with them again. So, but I mean, I guess it depends on the journalistic culture in each countries, but in Britain and in America, which is what I can speak about, an embargo will be respected. Yeah. So, I mean, but the other thing is that is to have the bullet points at the conference, so that these are the key findings, the top 6 key findings. So what's the worst thing that's happening there in Thailand? You're saying massive import of waste leads to poisoning of the environment. Have you got something specific?
Yes, the factories there, they burn the imported waste, they use it as a fuel, and it leads to the contamination of the local ground with dioxins.
Really?
And the people use the ground for agriculture, of course. So
wow, and so
contaminates their bodies as well.
How come they're allowed to burn it?
Well, okay, this is where it starts to be complex, but the problem is that there is a huge amount of waste, and the usual way how it's treated is that it's burned either in open fires or in factories and used as fuel, because it's not really banned there yet. The legislation is a bit loose regarding this.
Right. Okay. Okay. All right. That's well thought through, Martin. Thank you. Yeah. Nwabufo. Hello. Welcome, Nwabufo. So, can you tell us where you are and what your organization is?
Hello, is it Nwabufo?
Yes. Hi. Hello.
Yeah. Good afternoon. I'm from Cameroon, and my organization is Family Health and Development Foundation. I also represent several civil society organizations here in Cameroon.
Okay. And so what would
Sorry,
be
I'm in a very noisy environment. That's why my reaction is
It's okay, we can hear you. We can hear you. So what would be your key message, Nwabufo?
well, my key message will be let's collaborate to protect our planet.
And absolutely, yeah, that's a very important message. You have something specific for your organization? Do you have something specific for your organization's projects?
Hello?
Hi, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Yeah, do you have something specific? Is there a specific project or initiative that that you can talk about?
Actually, we've been trying to, since we have several civil society organizations we work with, we've been trying to bring the message and let them catch the vision about the imports of pesticides, dangerous pesticides to our area. And so we are working with that. We've created some group and we are sensitizing other civil society organizations so that the message can go all over the country.
Okay. Is there a place in the country where it's particularly bad problem?
Sorry?
Is there somewhere where it's particularly bad, the pollution from the pesticides?
Yes. We really have some bad places, especially where farmers are. And they seem really not to understand the impact of this pesticide on them. Actually, from what I've been gaining, it's not easy to let these people stop using it, even though it's dangerous to them. So for me, I've been trying to see, not to tell them, to tell them, in fact, another strategy for me was to see how we can teach them on natural natural manure that they can use, because there's some natural manure that they can use to grow their crops.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
So it has been a burden for me to organize a training on the use of natural manure for their gardening and for their crops, especially women that grow vegetables. They also use this pesticide. So virtually a lot of fruits and vegetables that reach us in the market are polluted. And so for me, I've been trying to do some training to learn some of those natural manure that they can use to grow their crops. So that's what my organization is really focused on trying to do. Yes.
Yeah. So that's
but
very good.
More training. I've attended one training on that, and I have to scale up the training to other farmers. But I need more training on that so that I will really have enough information to give them, so they will stop using what they are using and go natural and organic. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I think that sounds great. It sounds you've got a very key message there to go natural, and this is the damage that it's been done by pesticides. But you've also got an answer there. Yeah. So that's
okay. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Yeah. Okay, who'd like to go next? David.
Sorry, can you come again? What was the question? I lost you on the question.
Yeah, so, but you put in the chat your story, your key message about is a story about a mining company and polluted drinking water in a village. Can you tell us about that?
Sorry, Adam, I believe that story is from David and he's having connection problems. I don't know if he's able to connect.
Yeah. Oh, okay. All right. Well, that's something like a very strong and shocking story. So if David can come back to us, that would be good. That we'd like to talk about that. Yeah.
There's another story from Chitra.
Okay, let's have a look at that. Yes. Okay. So Chitra. Would you like to tell us about that? Chitra?
Okay, sorry. My mic was off.
No problem.
I'm on now.
Oh, yes, David, okay, so you're all right. So you're back on. So let's jump back to David. Yes, so you're telling us about the water supply in in Taimar village. Tell us about that story, David.
Yes, that story came sometimes last year, and even the Environment Protection Agency is aware of it because this is a big town that has over 500 inhabitants, and it's a big village, and even the water, the stream, the river that goes very close also to the university, the Jala University. So the source of that water has been used as one of the source of drinking, but a mining company has been mining at the top of the river, and the river gets polluted. There was even an incident of 7 deaths of kids that went and went to the river to swim. 7 of them got, yes. The Environment Protection Agency was aware of that. There was an the environmental committee in Parliament even went there to investigate what was the cause of the death. So for us as CSOs, it's a concern to us, and we are engaging the Environment Protection to give us outcome of whatever investigation they may have done. So that one is a key story to us, and we would like to propagate it. And this is just one example.
So what stage is it at now? The investigation has been done and they're not releasing it, or they're still investigating? Where are we with this?
I believe they are still investigating because they are not out with any concrete information to us.
And how long has the investigation been going on?
I told you it's since earlier this year. Since earlier this year. But you know, I've been in the provinces. Hopefully by over the weekend, I will be in the city. So by Monday or Tuesday, I will engage the Environment Protection Agency to get for them to tell us what is the status of that investigation. If they have completed, what is their finding and what actions next they will be taking.
Yes, and also, what are they going to do to stop this happening again? I mean, that is just terrible. That's really, really.
It's shocking. Terrible. Yes, all major rivers are now being mined. In fact, it has become so much problematic that they too are now in the rampage to ensure that they stop mining. But who gives the mining companies license? It's the EPA and the National Mineral Agency.
Why is the EPA giving them mining licenses?
Yeah, well, they give authority and they are supposed to monitor them every 3 months. So we want to know whether they have been monitoring them to look at their activities.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that's it's very important work that you're doing there, David, to be to be on this. I don't even want to call it a story because it's such a shocking scandal. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. And do you think that when do you think you would approach the media about this? Say on next week you go to them and they say the investigation's still ongoing. We don't have anything to tell you.
Yes.
Do you think that's the time to approach the media, or do you think you should wait until, you know, I suppose
in fact, the media, as I sent my earlier message, that the media, my experience with the media is mixed feeling. There are some media houses, they don't compromise. For instance, those I mentioned in my text, yeah, those are national media houses, and whatever that is human interest story, they are ready to air it. So some of us have been working with them, and they give us air times when such issues come up. So it's just a matter of engaging them. We can join the team and can take the media as a team, engage the EPA. This has happened in Teama sometimes early this year. What is the status? What is happening? What has been your investigation? Have you concluded? Yes. So the media also can come on board to help in knowing the status. So engaging the media is not just a one-stop, it's a continuous process.
Exactly. That's very well put, David. It is, because that's so true what you say. It's not one stop, it's a continuous process. It's about relationship building. Yeah. And you know, as in many relationships, it's not always going to go your way. So you're gonna have to compromise sometimes. Yeah. So yeah, wider life experience. But seriously, it's a key point you're making. We've got to be thinking, dealing with the media, got to think long term, build that relationship, build that connection. They won't always want what you want. You won't always want what they want, but you can work together. You can be productive allies on this. So yeah, and that's what you want to be thinking about. If they say, you know, we don't have any news on it, then you want to be thinking about, maybe that is a story that you know, this is a terrible thing. People died from this. Children died. Why don't they have any news? How long is this going to take? What's going on here? What are the vested interests here? Who else should I be speaking to about this? You know, and the other thing you can all be thinking about is, we've all been talking about your local and national media, but in all of your countries, there are correspondents for Reuters and Associated Press and foreign newspapers, and you know, from the Times and the Financial Times and the Guardian and the New York Times and Le Figaro and, you know, Die Zeit. They might not be in your country. They're probably not, for example, based in Cameroon, but there'll be a regional correspondent in Lagos, or there may be one in Yaoundé who's covering West Africa, or one in Rabat who's covering North Africa. So, you know, find out where with the international media, because governments and government agencies are very sensitive, more sensitive, I think, to coverage in the foreign press. So find out who is the correspondent for people like Reuters and Associated Press covering your country. You know, it wouldn't be hard to find out. You know, there'll be a regional correspondent. They may, and also news agencies and newspapers, they have the local correspondent sometimes called a stringer. A stringer is someone who's not on the staff, but is like the point of contact. So it may be, you know, this is a terrible story, David. And like I said, I even hate to use the word story. It's a tragedy and a scandal that and I can imagine that an international media might be interested in that, you know, if because it's so bad that people have died, children have died because of this. So think about that, you know, and you will not have, in dealing with the international media, any issues about having to pay petrol money for them to come and report on it or not. I mean, that's just not going to happen. So don't forget, you know, that's something you know, we can think about as well. Thank you, thank you, David.
You're welcome.
Leslie, have your hand up.
Yes, thank you for that point you just made. I just wanted to share my present experience on that. Here, not necessarily in Lagos, here at an international event in Uruguay, I have just met a former BBC reporter who now reports for Al Jazeera, and a very top one for that matter, covering Africa. And we had a good discussion, shared some of the work we do, and also we had just exchanged cards to continue the relationship. So this is because I recognize that such international media are very useful. She has confirmed that whenever we have an event that is, that is of good international coverage, I could always talk to her, and
yes,
I think this is a very good one. Yeah.
That's a very good point, Leslie. Yeah, and also, I'm talking about Reuters and Associated Press, but of course there is the media, the global media in the developing world as well, like Al Jazeera, which is based in Qatar. So I think they will be more likely, perhaps, to be or very likely to be interested in a story in Africa. As perhaps might be easier than trying to get the New York Times interested, although they might be interested as well, because you never know what kind of things are going on in these newsrooms, what their agenda is. They might be very be very focused on pollution and on the Western countries dumping their toxic stuff onto the developing world. You don't know what their agenda is. That's why it's very handy what Leslie was saying just now, to have that chat with people, to just get out there and start meeting people. If you go to if you're in Lagos, I'm pretty sure that for example, Reuters and the big international news agencies have bureaus there. Just call them up and say, can I swing by? Who covers the environment? Can I come and have a chat with you? So okay, so we're going to have to move on from that, because we've only got 20 minutes left, and I do want to talk about interviews, a little bit about interviews, because it's, having said all that about making the contact with the journalist, when you make the contact with the journalist, and the journalist is going to want to talk to you. So how do we handle that? So I've got a slide here with some points here. The journalist wants to interview you. That's great. You've found your journalist, they're interested in your story, they want to talk to you. So here's what to ask them first. How does it work? As some of you will already know this, but some of you might not, and it's always good to recap. So the first thing is to define the nature of the chat before you start talking. Are we talking on the record or off the record? So on the record means that whatever you say can be quoted. So think very carefully before you answer. So if a journalist rings you up in your office, says, hello, I'm Jane from the West African Chronicle, and I'm doing a piece about plastic pollution. What do you think about this? Once that journalist has identified themselves as a journalist to you, they can quote whatever you say. So before, you might have very strong emotions about this. You might have very strong feelings about it, but you want to sound professional. So think about what you answer. You don't have to answer immediately. You can say, that's a good question. Can I have a moment to think about that? I was working on something else. You can take that time. So, but ask them, is this an on the record or off the record discussion? And you can have both. You can say things on the record and off the record. What's the difference? On the record, as I say, means whatever you say, you can be quoted by name. Off the record usually means they can use the information in the article, but it won't be attributed to you or your organization. But you should check this, because sometimes people have different ideas about what off the record means. What you cannot do, you cannot say something and then say, oh, by the way, that was off the record. That doesn't really work. So, you have to think it through when you speak to a journalist. If they call you out of the blue, you can do the same as they do. You can say, I'm sorry, I'm busy at the moment, but I'd really be happy to talk to you in 20 minutes. Could you send me an email telling me what you'd like to talk about? You can always ask for the questions in advance. They probably won't give you the questions, but what they might do, though, is give you the themes of the questions. So they might say, I want to talk to you about pesticides being dumped. They might not say precisely what they want to talk about, but you can ask them for that. The more that you can get them to tell you, the better you can prepare. You can ask for quote authorization, which means you get to check the quotes before they're printed. Most newspapers won't give you this, and most news organizations won't give you this. But in some European countries, I believe, for example, in Germany and Switzerland, they have to give you that. It's your legal right. to say, I want to see what the quotes are. And even if you said something and they've reported it correctly, you may be able to say, if you didn't like the way it came out, I want to change that. So, you know, this is really what we call poacher turned gamekeeper, because I'm a journalist. So, you know, but now I'm telling you how it works from the other side, from the gamekeeper's side. One thing you can think about doing, especially if it's in person or also on the phone, tape the conversation. Ask for their permission. Say, I would like to tape this conversation. Obviously, if you're giving an interview and they're recording you, you can record them. You can record it as well because it's being recorded. But especially if it's something sensitive to do perhaps with governments or powerful companies and things, you want to have a record of what exactly you said to this person and when you said it. So you can ask them what the interview is for, what's it about, what's the angle, when's it going to run. Stick to what you know. Give short, informed answers. Don't speculate or guess. If you don't know something, you can say so. You can always say, I'm not sure. Can I get back to you on that? Relax, control your breathing. Don't babble. There can be a tendency, especially if someone puts a camera in your face at a press conference, people, they talk too much. It's, you know, you get used to it. Politicians and business people are sent on very expensive media training courses. So you're not doing that, but you can practice, you know, you can practice with your friends. If, you know, someone can hold a phone in front of you, do a bit of role play, you're going to be giving a press conference, they can be the journalist, hold the phone in front of you, start asking you questions, practice giving your answers. Excuse me. The more you practice, the more familiar you'll be when the question is asked, and you'll know, you know, you'll develop a mental muscle memory. So have a practice run with a colleague, role-playing the journalist. So all of this leads us to our second exercise, which we'll get to in a minute. What makes a successful interview? So a successful interview is a win-win. It's a win for you, for your organization, because you've got your message across, and the journalist got a story or a good part of the story. So she or he is happy, you're happy. And that means anticipating the questions. So either asking the questions, or if they won't tell you the questions, or you're having a press conference, imagining, practicing, doing a role play with the questions, planning your answers, keeping focused on your key messages. So you can always say that you'll come back to them later with an answer if you're not sure about something, unless it's a live broadcast, in which case you really have to try and think through everything that they might ask you. So this brings us to our second exercise, a quick exercise. You are the journalist. You've sent out your press release. You've made your calls. You've told them about the horrific scandal of the pollution and everything. What are they going to ask you? Try and plan that out. What, if you were the journalist, what would you ask yourself? What are you interested in? Why would you ask that? Why would you be interested in that? What's new here? You know, think of the kind of questions that the journalist might ask you. Then you'll be prepared to answer them. And again, write them out, either on screen or by hand. Again, I'm such a believer in the old analog solutions of writing things out by hand with a pen on a piece of paper. Clarifies your thoughts. So it's 45 to now. So we want to talk it through. We're going to do a real quick fire one here, and let's regroup at 10 to the hour. You know, don't overthink this. Just think what comes into your head, what's likely to ask you, what you're going to answer. Okay? Regroup in 5 minutes. Okay, welcome back, everyone. Who'd like to start?
Blessing and me be first that time. Babe, call your name. Yeah, no call my name.
Anybody like to start? Dolores?
Well, I'm from the EEB team.
Yeah, I know. So you didn't do it. Yeah.
No, well, we actually did it, but I don't know if it's useful. It's better than somebody else does it.
Sure. Okay. But for that, I need a volunteer.
Well, we just pick one. Let's pick. No, David. He was working on this mercury poisoning. No, with the river poisoning.
Yes. Yeah.
Do you have connection, David?
No, I don't see. He's muted. David, are you here? No, he's muted.
Look, you have a volunteer now.
Martin.
All right. So may I share my thoughts?
Absolutely. Yeah, of course.
All right. So I want to talk about what I mentioned before, the topic of importing the waste into Thailand and its better treatment. So the natural questions that came to my mind are, where does the waste come from? Is there an alternative waste treatment other than burning it?
Yes,
who benefits from the waste import? Do the affected communities participate in the system? And I would be also a bit more interested in the context and like a global context and consequences probably. And if the situation is getting worse or better recently.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think in these questions, in these kind of interviews and scenarios, it's always good to anticipate them asking, what's the worst? Where is this the worst? Where, you know, is there something that's been completely destroyed by this, or a river that's dead, or a waterfall that's filthy, you know, is because they, you know, the worse it is, the stronger the story is. That's the awful business that we're in, you know. And if you have an example like that you can show them, you've got slides of that or something, you know. But I'm also thinking about, you know, maybe something, you know, performative almost, to bring a scientist along to say, you know, I checked this water supply and this is what I found, you know, to have the scientist there. And I was shocked at the level of chemicals that were here, you know, and that's beyond any safe concentration, you know, because all your organizations are doing brilliant work, but you'll be seen as organizations with an agenda, which you have, and it's a good agenda, obviously. But if you've got an outside voice that you can bring in to kind of verify you, I mean, it doesn't need verifying, but if you have that extra person, you know, that's why I'm trying to think just off the top of my head about if you can give a bit of a spectacle, you know, like to dissect the fish and to show how the mercury is present in the fish flesh. I don't know how you do that, but you know, just off the top of my head, you know, thinking a bit left field, anything that makes something visual difference, because it's very difficult, your business, all of you. It's, you know, it's reports, it's statistics, it's numbers, it's chemicals, it's you know, it's not easy. It's not easy, but that's good work, Martin. Yeah, good thoughts. Yeah.
Well, I can give you one example actually, because we very often collect eggs for sampling, and sometimes we make egg salad for the journalists so they can see a bit of a connection, like it's real food that you eat, and that the people there eat.
Yeah, it's the connecting. I think it's one of the key things, the key takeaways, as we say from our session today, is to think how to make that connection between the big macro issue, the horror of this, you know, planetary or regional global phenomena, to boil it down to make people realize that means you know, you, what you eat, what you drink, what you swim in. Obviously, you know, the tragedy of, we've already heard about, or the tragedy of what people have swum in, that terrible, horrible story. But it's that. So, and that's anticipating those kind of questions, which, you know, also loops back to one of our earlier slides, which is where we say, so what? You know, just ask yourself that brutal question, so what? You know, there's pollution, there's this, that, so what? Well, it's in your egg salad, it's in your tuna sandwich. You know, that's making that connection is what makes it strong. But we're starting to run out of time now, but is there anybody else, you know, maybe someone we haven't heard from? Because
yeah. Adam, may I have a question?
Sure.
Just because going back to Elena's question at the beginning, it's very difficult to talk about mercury in a tuna sandwich when we are actually trying to connect the issue to the lamps. So yes. Maybe I'm just putting it out there that maybe the way to do it is, you know, if the mercury is very dangerous, and there is a precedence to that. That's Minamata accident in the 50s, which is a horrible story.
Yeah.
Tragic. Then, you know, since mercury is such a dangerous thing, the exposure to mercury means that, you know, you could be affected by this, that, and the other. I don't know if that kind of linking, yeah, absolutely. It that way makes sense. I can't hear you. You are 1 second. Yeah.
It's a question of making it.
We can't hear you.
No, sorry, I have.
It's a question of making it relevant to people's everyday experience. So in the lamps, yeah. But from the lamps, presumably it leaches into the broader ecosystem anyway, unfortunately. So, you know, once mercury is out there, it goes, you know, it rolls around everywhere. Yeah. So yeah, but absolutely, Andrea, the point is to find the issue that connects to people's everyday lives and makes them think that matters to me. You know. Yeah. So, you know, if there's a mining company at the top of the river, where's that river going? Where does that river go? What does that feed into a reservoir, or is it coming off a reservoir? You know, it's all about answering that so what question that makes it relevant to people's everyday lived experiences, as we say nowadays. Now, that it's not just something, you know, up country or in another part of the world, that we're on a planet, and the planet is a living ecosystem, and it's all linked and all connected together.
Well, on that note, I just want to say thank you very much for your session. This was very, very interesting, I think. I hope our participants think the same. Luckily, the session is recording, so if you need to review anything or to remind yourselves of anything, this is a recorded session, and we will share it on our shared document, on our shared platform. The other thing I wanted to ask you, Adam, is that could you share this very nice presentation you made?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I just noticed. Of course, I will. I'll send it to you. I just noticed a grammatical error, so I have to correct that.
Yeah, we have a shared document, and we will add that to. We will add the presentation to the communications folder.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. The only thing I would ask is that people keep it within their organizations, that you don't send it out, you know, to all your friends and neighbors and, you know, people down the road or whatever. No, but keep it for your actual organizations that are that are affiliated to the EEB. So thank you. But no, of course I share that, no problem. It was a pleasure working with you all. It was a privilege, especially to speak to people, you know, really on the front end of things, dealing with some horrible things to do with pollution and pesticides and all the things that are despoiling our planet. And I hope that our session today helps you make a little bit of a difference. Thank you very much for your time.
I think you did. Thank you very much, Adam. And please stay online a little bit. I just have to make a short announcement, and after everyone leaves the session, let's have a chat, a little bit, a quick chat.
Okay.
Just a reminder, tomorrow we are launching the joint statement. We have a press release, we have a communications toolkit that we have developed for you to use when you talk to the media. It has a set of key messages, and also we have posts for Twitter posts or social media posts for you to use. So all you need to do is to copy paste these social media posts, and you don't need to think about it. So to help you promote the joint statement, please use it by all means. We will share the link on WhatsApp, on the WhatsApp group, and also we will share the document in the share folders later this evening. One thing, please bear in mind, it is under embargo until tomorrow at 7 a.m. Central European time, which means that you cannot share any of these material before that time. This is a very strict deadline, so kindly respect it and use everything afterwards. Pitch your story to the media. You have very good tips. Make sure you have the messages. We have put out a set of messages so you can use them. But of course, you always have the ABT skills to resort to if you need to. But yes, go out and pitch your story, and talk to the media about the joint statement, about this important message you have to deliver on. You must deliver on the exports of the EU exports on banned pesticides. Yes, Martin. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Andrea. Yeah, I just wanted to ask.
Just 1 second. I can't hear you. Yes, go ahead.
You are talking about the pesticides campaign. It's the toxic-free future?
No, I'm talking now about the joint statement that many of you, I don't know if all of you, I don't know exactly who signed this
I will check with my
It's
colleagues.
about calling on the EU to stop the pesticides banned in our region. It's a recent joint statement. We haven't released it. We release it tomorrow. I think it's a joint European. The statement is signed by 250 NGOs, I think, and a lot of our members as well.
Hello.
It's a joint statement that we have been working on with the EU NGOs to ask the Commission to stop the exports of banned chemicals. So you have been signing on to this statement during the last weeks, and finally it will be released tomorrow.
Yeah, please, I wish to ask a question. Can I ask a question?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, please. I wish to share. I was thinking of sharing the joint statement with other organizations that did not actually sign. Is it okay? Like, can they also use it on their social media posts, or is it only the organizations that sign have to share it?
Anybody can share it as many organizations share it, the better. And they can sign on. You can sign on later. And if you cannot disseminate it tomorrow, feel free to do it whenever you can. The issue is to try to have the highest impact as possible in all our countries. But it doesn't have to be tomorrow or never. It's whenever you can. Best tomorrow, because we are all going to try to push for this. But this is answering. Yeah.
Okay, so I'll share with my networks, and then I'll ask them to share as well.
That's really great. Thank you for me.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Once again, just one last thing. Of course, if you need, please feel free to. We only deliver this toolkit in English, but if you by all means translate the material in your own context.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Before closing, I would like to do an announcement, which is a little bit sad because Geraldine is leaving us. So I just wanted to publicly thank her for all her work, and I would like you to say goodbye and hopefully see you soon, because she has been a great support for the capacity building network, and she has been really helping in a lot of things. So it's sad that she's going away, but she lived with us, a lot of things done. So we are really grateful to Geraldine. And thank you, Geraldine. Hope to see you soon.
Yes, thank you all also for your support and for being so engaged in the project. Big success to the campaign. Thank you.
It will be thanks to you as well. So thank you again.
Thank you, Geraldine, for your service to humanity.
We will stay online a little bit, our team, but thank you for joining and see you soon.